Hey, what's going on, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to be doing my way too early 2024 NFL mock draft. Now, some of you definitely are already asking, why is he doing a mock draft of 2024 when the 2023 NFL draft just ended? Well, it's always something that I like to do that's really fun. You're getting, and for me, it's for you guys, you get introduced to all of the new prospects that are coming out in the 2024 NFL class, and, you get an introduction to how they play, who they are, and then of course what teams are projected to do bad and what teams are going to pick early. But especially you getting an introduction to all the new players that are coming into the draft is definitely a plus, and you're coming into the college football season with that knowledge as well of which players are going to perform really good and which are not. And then also, obviously, this is not set in stone at all. Some of these players will reclass. Some of these players might go undrafted or go in later rounds. We'll probably look back at this and see it age horribly. But all of this is so far still a projection, including the picks. The order is based on Super Bowl odds and trying to predict as best records. Everything is not set in stone. It's more of just an introduction to the new prospects that are coming into the draft. But starting off this mock draft, Arizona is picking 1 and 2. That's based on their own pick and Houston's pick. But I don't see the Cardinals, if they're in this situation, picking Caleb Williams. That they would have two massive quarterback contracts on the roster. Kyler Murray just signed a humongous deal last year, and then they would draft immediately Caleb Williams, who would be paid a really high amount. But Tampa Bay Buccaneers are set at 3. I have them trading back. Definitely have them taking Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is hyped as the best quarterback prospect since Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck. He's a Mahomes-esque type of quarterback with that new age or era of quarterbacks. He's got that mobility. He's really good on the ground. His specialty is throwing on the run. He's got that accuracy. He won the Heisman. He's got a strong and really talented arm. He's got the pocket mobility and awareness. Really love Caleb Williams, and I think he's a lock for the number 1 overall pick. We've all heard about Caleb Williams, Heisman winner. Love him. But then for Arizona at 2, I have Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr., again, is also touted as one of the best prospects we've seen in a while. Probably the best wide receiver prospect since Jamar Chase, but showed utter dominance at Ohio State last year with his catch ball ability. His body control is insane for his height at 6'4", 205 pounds. He's also the son of Colts legend Marvin Harrison, but he isn't really built like Marvin Harrison. As Marvin Harrison was a smaller receiver, Marvin Harrison is bigger. He's 6'4", 205, but he also has that Marvin Harrison Colts legend-esque type of ability with his body control, with his route running. He's already really refined. Love Marvin Harrison Jr. as a prospect here. Arizona Cardinals are picking right after them. I have them going with Jared Verse. He's my top edge rusher in this class. He's really technically refined out of Florida State. And he had 9 sacks last year, was very productive, stud edge rusher, and he's got that NFL size as well, 6'4", 251 pounds. However, I would like to see him win on the outside a little bit more and flash that bend. He really worked through the inside a lot from the tape that I've seen. For the Los Angeles Rams, I do have them going with Drake May out of North Carolina. Drake May is a phenomenal dual-threat quarterback who can work through the ground, had 700 yards and 7 touchdowns last year, but he's also really, really effective through the air. Had over 4,000 yards, 38 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and was really good with Josh Downs last year. Now he is losing his wide receiver 1, but I think that Drake May is going to be on those Heisman finalist ballots. And Drake May, pretty solid quarterback, mostly pro-ready as well. And for the Rams, Matthew Stafford is definitely declining. You do still have him on a big contract, but last year he left with a neck injury or a back injury. He had a Tommy John issue with his UCL in the preseason. I think that his time in the NFL is starting to slow down. So you're going to draft your franchise quarterback hopeful in Drake May. For the Indianapolis Colts, I have them taking my number 1 tackle on the board, which is Joe Alt. Phenomenal run defender. He's a huge person at 6'7", 317 pounds. Phenomenal run blocker, phenomenal pass blocker. He's like a roadblock. Blue chip left tackle, in my opinion. And then for Indianapolis, you draft Anthony Richardson. What do? You get him a franchise left tackle in Joe Alt. So I have Indianapolis picking him. And then with the Washington Commanders, I don't necessarily see them taking quarterback here outside of Drake May and Caleb Williams. I think that there is a massive fall off for the quarterback position. Yes, you might see guys like Quinn Ewers and Michael Penix or Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy go in the first round, but I don't really think that right now they're even first round quarterbacks. Guys like JJ McCarthy, I see even reclassing. Probably Shedeur Sanders reclasses as well. Bo Nix, obviously senior, he has to be drafted in the draft class. I see him as like a second round guy. Quinn Ewers, definitely an inconsistent quarterback, but he does have that talent. Obviously, he was the number one prospect or number one high school recruit coming out in 2020. He was the highest rated quarterback recruit ever, and Texas is going to he's going to air out the ball this year with Steve Sarkisian. Obviously, that Bijan Robinson and Rashawn Johnson left. They lost their two best running backs, but they still have a really good receiver group. Obviously, they've got Xavier Worthy, and they've got Jatavion Sanders. So they're definitely going to air it out, but Quinn Ewers is definitely inaccurate still. He needs to refine that a lot. But moving back to the Commanders, I probably have them going with an edge rusher here. Going to go with Dallas Turner. You've got Chase Young. You didn't pick up his fifth-year option. And not Josh Sweat. Who is he? I mean, Chase Young probably is the replacement for this pick, due to them not picking up his fifth-year option and him being inconsistent, not really living up to that number 2 overall pick hype. Dallas Turner's got that bend off of the edge, and had a really productive freshman season. He had 8.5 sacks in 2021, was an all-freshman, was on the all-SEC freshman team. However, did take a step back last year. He only had 4 sacks, and I definitely don't think he's the best against the run. He's not a great shedder. That's why I definitely see the risk with him taking him at 6. I don't think he's really a top 10 prospect in my opinion, but Washington probably doesn't want to take a risk on a guy like Quinn Ewers at the 6th overall pick. That's really high for a guy that hasn't quite lived up to his hype yet. So I am going to take Dallas Turner, who I think is a safer option at 6. Moving on for edge, the Atlanta Falcons. I am definitely leaning towards defensive line. They didn't necessarily address it a lot last year. They could have gone Jalen Carter at 8 in the 2023 NFL draft. That's why I'm going to take JT Tuimoloau. JT Tuimoloau flashed heavily at the Penn State game. He had 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a touchdown. I think he's a top 10 prospect in my opinion. I think he's going to have a really big year at Ohio State. Bigger guy. He plays primarily the 5-tech hand in the ground. 6'4", 270 pounds. But Atlanta really needs to generate more pressure. However, Tuimoloau definitely has been inconsistent. He needs to continue building up that consistency at Ohio State. But I think he definitely could have a big year for Atlanta there. Moving on to Green Bay. This is probably Olu Fasano, or Fashanu, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Green Bay is going to lose David Bakhtiari pretty soon. He's getting older. He's like 32, and he hasn't been on the field much a lot. And especially now that you want to have your franchise guy in Jordan Love, drafting Olu Fasano is definitely a step in the right direction. However, if Green Bay's picking at 8, they probably are in contention to draft a quarterback because that means they would have a bad season. But we just need to see how Jordan Love really performs next year. But I'd rather them take Olu Fashanu, who I value way higher as a pass blocker and a run blocker, another really solid tackle at Penn State, who reclassed. He probably would have been the tackle 1 in this class, but he did reclass for his redshirt junior year. And then for Green Bay, I like that pick because you are going to lose David Bakhtiari pretty soon. Moving on for the Tennessee Titans, I love Brock Bowers. I think Brock Bowers is potentially the next coming of Travis Kelce. He's a Travis Kelce-esque type of receiver, tight end. Georgia used him all around. They, put him in the X, which is the wide receiver 1. They put him in the slot as a big slot. They put him in the Y, which is the traditional tight end position. They even handed him the ball off a few times. Incredibly versatile. He's not the biggest tight end. He's 6'4", 230 pounds, and he doesn't play in line like the greatest. He's not the greatest run blocking traditional tight end, but I mean the versatility. He's really, really fast for 230 pounds. He's like a low 4.4 guy. And then, he's dominant at the tight end position. He won the Mackey last year in 2022. And he's got that ability at the catch point. You can just throw him fade balls. He led the team in touchdowns with 7, tied with Ladd McConkey. And then he also led Georgia in yards last year. Worked with Stetson Bennett phenomenally. Brock Bowers has been doing this since his freshman year. I think he's going to have potentially a 1,000-yard receiving year at Georgia, even though they don't air the ball out too much. Loved Brock Bowers. And then for Tennessee, they got Austin Hooper at tight end, and I think that's it. But they've got some young guys there to throw in. But Brock Bowers isn't a traditional inline tight end. He's more of a receiver and like a hybrid receiver tight end in reality, and that's how they usually play him. But I love Brock Bowers, and I think that's a great pick. And I do think he goes in the top 10, similarly how Kyle Pitts went 4th overall in 2021. Moving on to the Chicago Bears, they need more defensive line help. I'm going to take Mason Smith with 2 A's. Would like Mason Smith a lot at LSU. Bigger guy, more of a 3-tech at LSU. Has good production as well. I think he's going to have another really good season. And then for Chicago, everybody's really mad that they passed up on Jalen Carter this past year. But I think that if you come back this year and get Mason Smith, you shore up that defensive line position. You get better in the run game. And then he can also has that pass rush versatility. For Las Vegas, I think that this is where we're going to see quarterback come off. You've had 1 year of the Jimmy Garoppolo experience. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is obviously going to take a step back because that 49ers system is so quarterback friendly that his stats were boosted a lot. I think that Vegas has a bad year. I do think that Vegas is a top 10 pick. They have him at 11, but Quinn Ewers definitely needs to get more consistent, especially with his accuracy and his downfield accuracy. But he's got that talent at quarterback. He's got that arm. He's an able runner. And if you can cash in on that number one hype, or that number one quarterback ranking hype that he had in 2020, I like that pick for Las Vegas as a developmental quarterback. And you could even sit him for a year because you still have Jimmy Garoppolo under contract, technically for 2 years after that, even though you have an out in 2025 or 2024. Chicago is back up. This is for the Panthers, I'm pretty sure. If the 10th overall pick was not the Panthers. I think that this is a good pick for Emeka Egbuka. You have Justin Fields at quarterback. You've got DJ Moore at your X receiver. You've got Darnell Mooney in your slot, and now you pick your traditional Z receiver, which is Emeka Egbuka, who's got phenomenal hands at the wide receiver position. He's really good on jump balls as well, and he's fast for the position. He's got NFL size at 6'1", 205 pounds. Had a really productive year at Ohio State last year at over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. He was really the Batman, or he was the Robin to Marvin Harrison's Batman. Now, he doesn't really have an X build, and you really want to pick a guy inside the top 15 with that kind of X build, or if he doesn't have one, he has the production to back it up. And that's why I have Emeka Egbuka going this high. I think he's a top 10 prospect. He has the production to back it up, and I think he's going to have another really good year at Ohio State. Just another product of that Brian Hartline system at Ohio State. Moving on for the Denver Broncos, the Denver Broncos probably would have picked Emeka Egbuka at this pick. However, I am going to have them going with edge rusher, going to have them going with Braylon Trice, double-digit sack guy at Washington. He's another really good edge rusher. We're going to see a lot of Pac-12 edge rushers or Pac-12 guys go this draft. I think the Pac-12 is going to produce a ton of really good prospects this year. They're really built up, the Pac-12. And then Washington especially. Washington's going to have some good guys with Michael Penix Jr. They got Romeo Dunes. They've got Fatui. And then they've also got Trice. Washington had a phenomenal year last year. And Braylon Trice was one of the reasons why. He generated a ton of pressure. He had double-digit sacks, obviously. He has that NFL size as well. And then for Denver, you just traded away Bradley Chubb for a first-round pick last year. Replace him with Braylon Trice this year. I could also definitely see them going with wide receiver. But I think that after Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, there definitely is a fall-off with Romeo Dunes, like a late first-round guy, and then Xavier Worthy. I don't have him super high. He's a small receiver, but he's not very good downfield with tracking, and his hands are inconsistent. Would like to see him have a lot better of a year this year. For the New England Patriots, I'm debating whether C.J. Latham or Samatai, Kingsley Samatai, or Suamatai, sorry. Kingsley Suamatai, tackle from BYU. He played right tackle last year, but he has that versatility because he's going to play primary left tackle this year. Blake Freeland was that guy last year. And then BYU just produces some really good tackles out in Utah. But then I'm going to probably draft C.J. Latham. C.J. Latham, a solid offensive tackle out of Alabama. Played pretty okay last year, or played solid last year. He's going to have another good year this year. Primary pass blocker, obviously, because Alabama threw the ball a ton. And he was solid throughout most of the year. Was a little leaky at certain times. Not the strongest run blocker, not the biggest guy. But for New England, for the Patriots, they probably need another tackle. Trent Brown hasn't really worked out after they traded him. And they picked a lot of interior guys last year during the draft, like Antonio Mafi. But I would like to see them going with left tackle here, with a primary left tackle. I'm going to go with C.J. Latham at 14. And then for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that this is a lock for them. Going to go with Jeremy Trotter Jr. Jeremy Trotter is a traditional Mike linebacker. He's that downhill run defender. He's good in coverage. He's an overall solid Mike linebacker. And then for Pittsburgh especially, you picked Devin Bush really, really high a few years ago, and he has not worked out really at all. And you don't have that Mike linebacker, and I think Jeremy Trotter Jr. Fits really well within that Pittsburgh system as well, coming from Clemson. We saw his teammate Trenton Simpson would go in the third round last year. I think he went to Baltimore, if I'm not incorrect. But Jeremy Trotter Jr. is definitely a step above Trenton Simpson, definitely. And I like that pick for pick. All right, so the mock draft database made a mistake for some reason. Originally, they had Arizona as Minnesota's pick, but they fixed it. So, obviously, with Minnesota, I think that they need edge rusher. Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith are both over 30. And then Leatu Latu, underrated linebacker, our edge rusher out of UCLA. He had 10.5 sacks last year. He's got really good speed and athleticism and bend off the edge. So, like that for Minnesota here. The Houston Texans are back up, and this is where I would like them to take probably Romeo Odunes, or Roma Dunes. He is a big body X receiver. He's around 6'3". He's like, over 200 pounds probably. I'm pretty sure. And then he also has that production with Michael Penix Jr. And then you draft C.J. Stroud last year. You got, you still got Nico Collins on the outside. You have Tank Dell in the slot. You're going to draft Romeo Odunes as your Z or as your X guy. He also has that athleticism and the jump ball ability, like Romeo Odunes going to Houston here. For the Los Angeles Chargers, I think that this is probably going to be Kool-Aid McKinstry. Now, I definitely could have had Kool-Aid McKinstry going a lot higher in this draft class. I think he's a top 10 prospect in my opinion. I really like Kool-Aid McKinstry, but he is going to I think he's going to fall a little bit more unless he has a phenomenal season at Alabama. He had a good season last year, but unless he has a phenomenal season at Alabama, I see the cornerback group in this draft class slipping a little bit. There really isn't a standout outside of Kool-Aid McKinstry, but Kool-Aid McKinstry is, he is a boundary cornerback, but he is a little thinner. He's 6'1", 188. He's got good length at the cornerback position, but he's got a thinner frame. He can be bullied a little bit by bigger receivers, but I think he is pretty impactful in the run game. He's got good footwork and solid technique at the cornerback position. Primary man cornerback, but you can't really press him. But then guys like Denzel Burke and Kaylee King, these guys both have kind of question marks as well, with Denzel Burke not getting a ton of playing time. Really showed out last year more, but doesn't have super production. And then Kaylee King was next to Joey Porter Jr., but got exposed by guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and had a little bit of an inconsistent season. But the cornerback class definitely is taking a step back from the past couple of years. Like in 2022, we saw Sauce Gardner, and we had some really good guys in the 2022 class. And then last year with Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, we had some really good guys there too. For the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to go with Michael Hall Jr. I could definitely see him going a lot higher in this draft if he shoots up draft boards and has a really good season at Ohio State. Another 3-tech defensive lineman. I have him and Jerzan Newton both as my defensive tackle 2 and 3. Michael Hall and Newton are both 3-tech guys. They're both around like 300 pounds, like 290. Both 6'2", same height. So they're around the same type of play style too, as Newton is more of a thumper. He's more of that interior force against the run, especially in that Illinois defense. But then you got Michael Hall, who's also a strong run defender, but also he has, I think, more juice in the pass game. And then for New Orleans, you got draft Brian Bresee last year. Now you're going to get Michael Hall, who's going to be that 3-tech right up against Brian Bresee next year. Pretty good place to take a guy that I think is underrated, Johnny Wilson, out of Florida State. Now, Johnny Wilson's a bit of a unicorn at the position. He's humongous for a traditional wide receiver. He's more of a hybrid tight end wide receiver. He's 6'7", 230 pounds, but he's a freak athlete. He's phenomenal at the catch point. He gets really high. He jumps really high. He's got those long arms. He's also pretty fast for his size. He's like a 4'5" guy for being 230 pounds. But you know, he can line up in different positions. He's obviously an X or an inline like tight end, stand-up tight end. But he also has the versatility where he can be a big slot because he isn't slow for the position at all. And then obviously his partner in crime, Jordan Travis, who I think is also a candidate to possibly reclass. But Jordan Travis had a really good year last year, and Johnny Wilson was a big reason why he could just throw it up to him in the end zone. And then for the New York Giants, they don't really have that big body X receiver, and Johnny Wilson can fill that role. They have a ton of slot guys with like Slayton, with now Hyatt, with Isaiah Hodges even. Isaiah Hodges is like a Z type of receiver, but now you get that X body receiver in Johnny Wilson. For Detroit, this is definitely where I'm taking cornerback here. I definitely think they could have addressed cornerback within their 2 first-round picks. And then you trade away Jeff Okudah. Emmanuel Forbes is on a 1-year deal. And that really only leaves Cameron Sutton on the outside, and then maybe Adoree. But Denzel Burks, bigger cornerback. Obviously, he's an out-boundary cornerback, but he doesn't have so much production at Ohio State. He had a good year last year, and I think he probably goes in the late first round. This year, would like to see what he does at Ohio State. He's one of the players that I'm definitely looking out for. And then for Detroit, they definitely need a cornerback. I think after next year, I think that's probably going to be their biggest need when it's all said and done. Moving on to Miami, going to go with Sua Matai. I'm going to go with Sua Matai here. Obviously, he does have that flexibility. He's going to play primary left tackle this year, but he played right tackle. He's got that versatility, and he's also a very solid player. He's a very solid player at a BYU. That versatility is definitely why I'm picking him here for Miami. Miami, I think, needs a true right tackle, a true blind side protector for Tua Tagovailoa, who is a lefty quarterback. You do have Terrell Armstead, but Terrell Armstead, the left tackle, he doesn't play right tackle. You're really needing that position, as the Miami didn't really have a good offensive line last year. And then Sua Matai, I think, even potentially goes higher than this. BYU produces a lot of really good tackles, and he's really good, versatile, and solid pass blocker out of BYU, like Sua Matai for Miami. Jacksonville, this is probably also going to be cornerback, but I would probably debate going with safety even at this position, because the safety class, what I will say about the safety class is it definitely is one of the strong suits of the 2024 NFL draft class. It was last year, the safety class was really bad. Outside of Brian Branch, who's really a slot cornerback, it was weaker, and that was definitely shown within the draft selections, with Brian Branch being the first safety off the board at like 45, and the next one being like Jair Brown. It was a weaker safety class, but the safety class is definitely much better with Kalen Bullock, Javon Bullard, Andrew Makuba, and then Cooper DeJean. Those guys are all guys that are potential first-round picks, early second-round picks. But for Jacksonville, I'm debating going with Keely King. I think Keely King probably slips to like the second round. Don't love him entirely out of Penn State. He can get exposed on some areas, and he's also not the biggest cornerback, and he doesn't have the most production. So I'd probably end up going with some type of. I think I am going to convince myself to go safety here. I think that safety is one of Jacksonville's biggest needs. It's really low on the mock draft simulators, but I think in reality, they are weak at the safety position. Going to go with Caleb Bullock. Now Bullock is a bigger, like really good free safety build of a quarterback. He's around 6'3", like 190 pounds. He's got that production. He had 5 interceptions last year at USC. Was that quarterback of the defense. 6 pass deflections as well. And then for Jacksonville, he's going to be your traditional free safety. He's going to help that defense a lot, especially within the pass game. As you now have 3 new rookie quarterbacks, one of them maybe shows out. So, like that pick for Jacksonville with Bullock. The New York Jets selection at 24. This is not going to be the New York Jets. This is going to be the Green Bay Packers. So let's just pretend that this is the Green Bay Packers pick because this is the Aaron Rodgers trade. Aaron Rodgers likely plays over 65% of the snaps. So this is definitely going to be Green Bay's pick. And then if we're looking for Green Bay, who they picked already, where are they? They picked Olufasano in the first pick. Now I think that this is a position where you take safety, and this probably was a need for the Jets anyways, but I'm going to go with Javon Bullard. Now Bullard is a little bit of a smaller safety. Not really, but he's around like 5'11", like 190, but he still has that production. And he can mix between the free and the strong safety position, but he's best in coverage. Played really well at Georgia last year. He'll play once again, I think, really good this year because Georgia's defense is just phenomenal. They don't allow a lot of receptions. They generate a ton of pressure. And then for the Green Bay Packers, once again, not the New York Jets, is the Green Bay Packers pick. You have Rasul Douglas, who plays mostly cornerback, and then he mixes in between safety. Your Adrian Amos, I think, is no longer on the roster, and this is basically that Adrian Amos replacement as your free safety or strong safety mix in between. For Seattle, I'm going to go with Jazon Newton. Obviously, I talked about him right before here when I was talking about Michael Hall. He's that thumper up the middle. He's got also some pass rushing upside. He had 4.5 sacks last year. He is a 3-tech. He's a tiny bit smaller, not necessarily smaller, but shorter at 6'2". Still a 300-pounder. Good against the run game. Solid technique as well. And then Illinois' defense was just so phenomenal last year, especially their secondary. But the quarterbacks didn't get a lot of time because their defensive line was getting at it last year. And then for Seattle, they didn't necessarily address their run game a ton. They did in the later rounds of the 2023 NFL Draft, but we're going to do just that and address the run. They were really bad last year. I think they're going to be a bottom 20 unit against the run this year, and hopefully Newton can help with that. Baltimore Ravens, I'm probably going to end up going with quarterback here. I think this is a fine place to go with Keely King. I mentioned him before. Still raw. He's still inconsistent. He doesn't have the greatest size at a Penn State, and he did definitely get exposed against Marvin Harrison Jr., but if he has another really solid year, I can see him sneaking into the first round. And then for Baltimore here, cornerback is still a need for them. They didn't address it too much in the 2023 NFL Draft. You still got Marcus Peters, but he is getting up there in age. And then that'll probably end up being that replacement for Marcus Peters with Keely King. For the Dallas Cowboys, this is probably wide receiver probably. I'm going to go with Troy Franklin out of Oregon. Like him a lot. Had a productive year with Bo Nix last year out of Oregon. He has the height, but he is a thinner wide receiver. He's around like 180 pounds, but he is big. He's tall at like 6'2", 6'3", around that range. Not the most physical receiver, definitely not, but he is a good route runner, and he does have that speed. And then for Dallas Cowboys, you trade for Brandon Cooks for a 5th and a 6th round, but you really only have CeeDee Lamb on that roster. They don't really target Michael Gallup all that often, and even though they signed him to a big contract after his ACL, he doesn't really look that good. And then Brandon Cooks is also getting up there in age, and he's also has a flexible contract that you can get out of. Going to draft Troy Franklin here. That's going to be your 1-2, like your slot, even your Z at Dallas for Brandon Cooks. Buffalo definitely also could have taken receiver, but I would like to take them, or I'd like to see them take edge. Going to go with Jack Sawyer here out of Ohio State. Jack Sawyer is solid edge rusher. He plays across from Tua Malau. He had 4.5 sacks last year. He's got decent size. It's another 6'4" guy. Seems like the entire class is 6'4". Got decent bend off the edge, but for Buffalo especially, Gregory Rousseau has been playing pretty fine off the edge, and you did sign Von Miller, but they rotate a lot, and the rotation doesn't generate a ton of pressure. So I think edge after this season will definitely be a need because Von Miller is getting up there in age, but he's still productive. And then I like the Jack Sawyer pick out of Ohio State. Ohio State's going to have a lot of players drafted in this draft, especially because of their defensive line with Jack Sawyer, Tua Malau. They've got Hall Jr., they've got Emeka Ibuka, Marvin Harrison. They've got a lot of guys that will be drafted, I think, very high in this draft class. And then for the San Francisco 49ers, give me Cameron Bebe out of Kansas State, another solid offensive tackle. I think that Blake Fisher also definitely is in contention. However, I don't think he's as solid as an offensive lineman as Connor Bebe out of Kansas State. But speaking about Blake Fisher, Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be crazy. Fisher is more of a traditional right tackle, and that's why I could definitely see San Francisco taking a traditional right tackle because you did lose McGlinchey after this season, and you've got Trent Williams on the left side, but Connor Bebe I think still is a little better and has more solid technique than Blake Fisher, and he plays. He can flip between the right tackle and the left tackle position, but it's hard to draft for San Francisco. They're always picking late, and they don't play by everybody else's rules. They play by their draft selection. That was definitely seen with this draft class when they drafted a kicker in the 3rd round. But I think that offensive tackle probably is their number one need for the 2024 NFL draft class. That's why I'm picking BB here. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I think that this is also an offensive tackle eligible pick. I don't know what's going on with Lyle Collins. They signed Orlando Brown to a massive extension this offseason. But we'll have to see after the season whether they really decide to go with offensive tackle. It depends how Lyle Collins performs. Would like to see him have a better year. But I think that this is the first selection for running back in this draft class. Going to go with Raheem Sanders or Rocket Sanders. This dude is a 3-down back. He's really solid. He probably would have been my running back 2 in this class right after Bijan Robinson. He's got the size at 6'3", at 6'2", 230. He's a bowling ball of a running back. He's got the speed. He's got 4.4 speed. And he had a phenomenal year at Arkansas last year. And he's called Rocket Sanders. So why not take him to Cincinnati, who I think is definitely in need for running back. Joe Mixon is always in a cut candidate rumor, and Samaje Perine left last season, signed with another team, so I think that they definitely could take Raheem Sanders, more of a downhill running back, one cut back. Philadelphia, I think that this is where I take Xavier Worthy. I would be very cautious of Xavier Worthy this offseason, especially with mock drafts. He was ranked 16 on the mock draft simulator database in their top 30 or top 100 players. How many have they done? But Xavier Worthy, I think, is a very, very questionable first round pick. I think he probably ends up in the 2nd or 3rd round next year. But Texas fans and the University of Texas definitely looking for a much bigger year from Xavier Worthy. He's fairly inconsistent. He is not the best at tracking the ball down the field. He is a smaller guy, and he fits mostly in the slot. But hopefully, Texas is looking for a much bigger year from all their wide receivers, including even their tight end, Jatavion Sanders, who I think is also an eligible first-round pick. But for Xavier Worthy, smaller guy, inconsistent, but Texas is going to air it out more. They Bijan Robinson and Rashawn Johnson both got drafted, so they're two biggest offensive weapons that they used a ton last year in 2022. They're gone, so they're going to air out the ball a ton with Quinn Ewers, with Xavier Worthy, with Sanders. Look forward to that. And then for the Kansas City Chiefs, speaking about Jatavion Sanders, I'm going to take him with the 32nd overall pick. Now you may be asking, why am I taking a tight end for Kansas City? Well, how long is Travis Kelce actually going to perform to his, traditional or to 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns and over 100 catches? How long is he really going to have that? And then plus Jatavion Sanders, also bigger tight end, traditional tight end. You have Travis Kelce always a pass catcher, and you leave that last position open, or that you leave the Y open a lot for, pass protection. So Jatavion Sanders would flip in as a receiver, as a pass protector, and they've been starting to run a lot of 12 personnel. Last year they ran the most 12 personnel they have in the last 5 years. So mix in Jatavion Sanders, who's really solid, a phenomenal red zone threat in at tight end. So that's going to do it for my way too early 2023 NFL mock draft. Let me know some of your favorite prospects for this draft class. Let me know how you thought that I did. Let me know who your team could potentially target next year. Let me know some prospects that you really like for this draft class, and I'll see you in the next one.